everyone, welcome to Beyond the Numbers, where we explore the human side of financial advice. In today's podcast, we are going to break down why the right financial support can improve not just your wealth, but your mental well-being. In today's world where the cost of living is fast outpaced by wage growth, coupled by inflation, rising expenses, and costly healthcare, financial stress can be a very, very real problem. The good news is there are different ways of managing it. I'm Emilia and I'm excited to be joined by my colleague, Matt Baer, Senior Partner at St. James's Place, who has worked alongside his clients to help them move forward with financial clarity and confidence. Originally based in London, Matt has made a big move to Singapore, transitioned from a lawyer to a financial advisor in 2013. Having spent more than a decade in Singapore, Matt has built a lovely family of 4 with 2 beautiful children of 4 and 2 years old. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Okay, so to start off first, I have a question. So, being a financial advisor yourself, it's very natural for people to assume that you have your finances, all together. And obviously having gone through a couple of major changes yourself, such as getting married, having children, building a family, have you at some point actually felt quite overwhelmed at managing your personal finances?
Yeah, I think naturally everyone gets a little bit stressed by finances. There's always a latent sort of fear of the unknown, what's around the corner. We've got rising costs, not only in Singapore, but in the UK and other countries. So dealing with rental increases, increased costs on insurance, worrying about school fees. There's always something that's lingering at the back of my mind in terms of, have I got everything covered? Do I need to be doing more? Should I put in place a better structure? Also, sort of more generally, when, sometimes reading the news, you can get a little bit into a rabbit hole especially when there's negative things going on, whether it's tariffs or, back in 2020, of course, there was so many negative news headlines that it was very easy to get a little bit distracted and to focus on the wrong things. So yes, I do get a bit stressed from time to time, but I think coming back to a plan that I've created for myself is always a good way to feel a bit better about things.
Yeah, makes sense. I think there's just so much to think about when it comes to finances. But just kind of like looking at, how you manage your clients. You obviously have supported so many clients over the past decade. So when it comes to that part, like how would you describe your approach when it comes to helping your clients manage that financial stress and make informed decisions?
Yeah, so I think helping people feel less stressed about their situation is probably one of the most rewarding things about what I do. And in order to do that, firstly, I start with listening, asking quite a lot of questions and really trying to understand my clients and what drives them, what motivates them. Also, how they think about money themselves. Everyone has a different relationship with money and see it as a different tool for doing different things. Some purely look at it as a security thing, whereas others are thinking more long-term, whether that's passing money on to children, giving them the best education they can have. Some might be just trying to maintain the lifestyle that they've got used to and don't want to lose that. I think in meetings, being a little bit like a counselor, and just really sitting there and chatting things through with clients and understanding and actually helping them to figure out what it is that they're maybe worried about. And until you've actually sat down with someone and talked these things through together, it's actually quite hard to pinpoint maybe where or what that fear is. So I think the conversations that I have with clients, they're really, as you alluded to before, it's not just about the numbers, it's about understanding what is behind these feelings and these fears and also the aspirations as well. So an open dialogue is the key thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Earlier, you mentioned quite a bit in terms of, the various reasons that people could potentially get quite stressed over money. So there are definitely a lot of different reasons, but in your conversations with clients, what are some of the most common stresses that you've heard so far? And, what are usually their worries?
I think quite often it really boils down to a couple of key things. Often people are, especially if they're maybe not satisfied in their job or getting towards the end of their career and they've maybe had enough, and in a sense they might be wanting to know, when can I stop working? And if you can demonstrate that this is possible in the next however many years, that can alleviate a lot of stress in that sense. Also, people want to know that they're going to be okay in the long run, so that they're not going to run out of money in their later years. That's a big fear. It's one of, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've got very basic things such as shelter, food, which, whilst most people that I'm meeting are not facing those hardships at the moment, is still something that lingers in the back of people's mind, because situations can change. Of course, we've got things like illness as well. It's often not a topic that you really want to discuss, maybe at home with family members, but in the meetings that I have with clients, it creates an open forum to talk through some of these things, which are maybe not that pleasant to chat through, but are important to think about. And again, highlight what are the risks to your future finances. So I think those are some of the key things, and just not being able to afford certain aspects of their lifestyle. So, are we going to have to move home if they're an expat in Singapore, for example, if they can no longer afford the school fees, or that sort of thing is usually the thing that drives fear, I suppose.
Wow. Thanks, Matt. I think that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned a really good point about people being afraid to kind of talk about money. So I think let's go a little bit deeper. I think money can be quite a sensitive and emotional topic to talk about sometimes, because that can be kind of tied to one's identity, level of success, power, and security. So in a recent money relationship monitor research done by St. James's Place in 2021, it is interesting to note that 59% of respondents indicated that wealth and succession planning is a source of stress in their life. And 57% says that money has caused and is likely to cause disharmony among the family. It is fair to say that money can be regarded as a taboo topic. Now, do you think that is the case? And how does your advice help to break through some of that stress?
Yeah, I certainly think money, or discussing money openly in public, is still a taboo topic. There are cultural differences when it comes to that. I think, for example, in the US, I know that someone becoming wealthy or maybe demonstrating that they are more wealthy is not considered such a taboo or distasteful thing. I think it's actually more celebrated. Whereas in other cultures, I think here, maybe the UK as well, is something that people tend to be a little bit more private and discreet about. But saying that, when I'm in a situation or a meeting with a client where it's okay to talk about money, that's actually the reason for being in that discussion. It's no longer a taboo. People like talking about their finances, and I think often it's actually quite a relief to share that burden, which, because of the nature of money being something that you don't really discuss, often people don't really know, am I in the right position financially? Am I doing the right things? And just having that conversation can really de-stress people. If I'm there and I'm saying, okay, everything's looking very much on track, you're on the right path to achieving these things that you want to achieve, then people can really enjoy that conversation. Equally, it can go the other way if someone's maybe thinking that they've got things covered and they haven't. Sometimes we do have to have slightly uncomfortable conversations with people, saying, if you don't change something about what you're doing now, you might end up in a position where you're not going to be able to live that lifestyle that you want, or afford that education for your children. So I prefer the former conversations, of course, if people are already on the right path. But naturally, I think just having that chat and that conversation is the first step on the way to making it less of a difficult thing to broach. Because as you also mentioned before, families can have huge arguments when it comes to money, and more isn't always better. I think when you've got huge estates that get left to children, grandchildren, more often than not, you hear of big family disputes going on. So that's another consideration. How much money do you actually want to pass on to children, to maybe try and avoid some of these emotional situations arising?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a lot about, providing relief. And I think I really like that, because that's essentially talking about, taking away a burden from someone who is stressed to begin with. And in your approach, I guess, you do mention about helping clients to break down the complexities and visualize their financial future. So how does that actually help to reduce financial stress for your clients and ultimately give them a peace of mind?
So something that I use with my clients is something called cash flow modeling. Sounds very complicated, but actually is just a piece of software which translates the numbers into something very visual that clients can interact with and understand their future in a much more basic way. Essentially, what's involved in it is inputting your goals. So it has a bar showing your age along the bottom. Then we put in specific life events that the client might be focusing on. Usually those are financial independence or retirement, because retirement these days is definitely a concept which is evolving, with people still wanting to do maybe part-time work. But I think financial independence is something that the majority of people that I meet are still striving to achieve. Other things might be buying a property, a dream family home, university costs. These are the main things. I think it's rare that you get someone that is focused on buying a boat or a material item, which is quite telling. From there, we put in your income, your expenses, and then also projected growth rates on those assets. And it comes up with a colorful chart which demonstrates how are those going to develop over time. And rather than focusing on just a number, I think historically in financial planning, people would say, I've got a target, I want to reach £1 million or $1 million by the time I'm 65. But actually that, I think just focusing on a number is quite a reductionist way of looking at things, because it's boiling it down to just a number, which doesn't really have any context or meaning behind it. With the cash flow planning, it's less about that number, even though that's still important. It's more about showing, if you stop working at this point, how will your assets go? Will they run out by the time you're 90? Will they stay flat? Will they continue increasing? So I think this tool, I think you need to see it to really understand how effective it can be. But certainly in meetings with a lot of clients, they're pretty blown away by how it makes them feel, seeing their future in a completely different way to what they're used to. And you can also model the unknowns, because ultimately, I think with financial planning, you're trying to add certainty to something which is extremely uncertain, i.e. your future. But by having it in this visual format, it's the same with journaling or a to-do list. Just writing it down and having that thing that you're working towards has a huge impact in terms of motivation. I think it's not the end goal, but it just helps people to have something that they're working towards. Over time, of course, this evolves with clients. So I might have a meeting. I had one with someone this morning where the cash flow looks extremely different to how it looked 6 months ago. So it's very much a living thing that we work on and adjust as life changes and things happen. Job changes, children, whatever it might be. It's something that we can just anchor your finances and your objectives, and it just gives people something in their armory to feel a little bit more confident about moving into the future.
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
I think after the session, we should probably sit down to go through my personal finances. Okay, so for the benefit of our listeners out there, if someone is concerned about his or her financial future, or just going through a really stressful time with his or her finances, what would be your advice in terms of just kind of taking control of their own personal money?
I think, again, just coming back to understanding what is the position you're actually in. I think it's easy to get sort of distracted by the current emotion that you're feeling, whether that's a job loss or something else. But if you step back and write down what your current assets are, check, do you have an emergency fund to get you through the next 6 months? And then from there on, either having a conversation with someone or just having something written down can make you feel a lot more secure. Naturally, there are other things that I can't help with. Sort of maybe it's finding another job, for example. But I think by having a better understanding of the position you're actually in, you could realize that actually your fear is maybe a bit unfounded. You're actually going to be fine for another year, 2 years. Maybe you should use this time to actually enjoy yourself and just not be swept up by the constant fear. So again, having these conversations, doing this cash flow planning, or just writing down your assets and understanding where you're at is quite a powerful way to make people feel a little bit more comfortable.
Well, Matt, I've personally learned a lot from your advice and perspective today. So I do have a couple of key takeaways. So from what you have shared earlier, it's really about writing down and mapping down my personal milestones of what I want to achieve. And also importantly, not shying away from having a very comprehensive conversation with a trusted financial advisor. Thanks, Matt. It's been really helpful. And thank you very much for sharing your insights once again.
Thank you.
For the rest of you, thank you very much for tuning in to this chat. We have obviously covered quite a lot, but I'm sure by now you can agree that financial wellness is not just a number, but it is a peace of mind. Importantly, the right advice can help you to turn uncertainty into clarity. We would love to continue this conversation with you, so please leave a comment below to let us know what financial issues keep you up at night. Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Numbers once again. Until the next one, see you then.